I just get going. It didn't say it was recording, but you might be able to see that it's recording. Yes, as long as you know. As long as you know. I'm just checking. So, welcome everyone. I'm Ray Middleton, and I'm really looking forward to spending a couple of hours together. I'm going to share some thoughts, but I don't want it to be a boring 2-hour lecture from me about some ideas. I'm keen on kind of dialogue. I like some of the principles from something called open dialogue. Which originally came from Western Lapland, and as a Russian thinker called Mikhail Bakhtin, his ideas kind of underlie those things. And it's not really, I mean, some of his stuff's a bit complicated, but the principles aren't complicated, which is, I don't know everything, and so we want to open up a dialogue and want to value what you know. I can share some useful ideas, what I found helpful. But then you can share things you know as well. And when we open up a dialogue, we value everybody's point of view. We don't have to agree about everything, but that way we can get to a new place, really. Go on a bit of a journey together for a couple of hours would be the idea. It's the opposite of some professional training, which kind of puts pressure on professionals to know everything. Sometimes it's like, why isn't that person engaging if they're facing multiple disadvantage or they have a lot of complex trauma history? Well, I don't know why I eat 2 puddings when I'm trying to lose weight. So if I don't fully understand myself and my behavior, like, why would I possibly have the answer to why is that person not engaging with the offer of the service? I can validate and value an opinion. I can say, well, I think it might be this or that, but I'm not 100% sure if I'm not 100% sure about myself. So we can say, well, I think it could be this, but what do you think? And does anyone else think? And does that, maybe that person's grandma has a better idea because they know them better, and we can open up the dialogue. So the idea is, as a principle, is I don't know everything, and it's a not knowing kind of approach. So I'm going to share a few thoughts and things I found helpful, and then I'll take us through a little exercise. But I'm happy to be interrupted by any comments or questions anytime. If you want to pop your hand up electronically, then Shelley can probably notice it. I'll try and notice it too. And I'll try and answer any questions. The answer might be, I don't know the answer to that, but you can ask me any question at all as we go along, and I'll attempt to answer them. So what I'm going to try and do is be kind of maximally useful to yourselves by sharing a kind of approach that I found quite helpful, which is linked to an image that I've created. And then I'll kind of take us through it in a few different kind of levels. And someone mentioned the Power Threat Meaning Framework. I'll kind of link it into that as well. But I really like pictures because I am a slow reader, and I've got a bad memory. So I like pictures because they help me remember stuff. And when I'm working with people, pictures help as well. So that's why I'm going to take us through a little bit of an image, and you're welcome to try that image. If it's helpful. And also, I just remembered, I told you I had a bad memory. I've got an app that you could, I wouldn't download it now because you'll get distracted from our chat, but I'll tell you at the end. It's you search in the App Store for Dr. Ray's Quest, with a Dr. space Ray's, R-A-Y-S, no apostrophe, space Quest. We'll pop it through the thing, and you can download the app. And it's just, I can't see any of it. I don't collect any data from it, but it's the same as the image. So I'd encourage people not to download it now because you'll get faffy. If you do download it, it's a bit faffy. You have to kind of click on the bit that says I'd like to register rather than I'm already a member. And then you have to, when you put your number in, you have to scroll down and find the English bit, the UK +44, and then put your number in. But it's free. It's all it is like a little reflective journal around these 6 questions. So don't worry about that now because we can send you the thing afterwards, and it's not everybody likes apps and stuff, but it's a reflective kind of diary journal about these quests. So I'm drawing on a few different things, like I did a couple of years of systemic family therapy, but I'm not a therapist, and I've got lots of experience of working services, so I've tended to manage services or work in them directly, or manage managers of services for reaching out to people facing multiple disadvantages, really, people with high levels of complex trauma, unresolved, who might be in and out of rough sleeping with alcohol and drug difficulties, who maybe have mental health problems, however you define that, other kinds of problems. And so that's the kind of work I've done for many years. Now I write and deliver training full-time and lots of different kinds of training. I've got a 5-day training program. That's how I pay the bills. So if anybody wants to email me if you want some training, or talk to me about the possibility of me delivering some training, because that would help me pay the bills. But I'm just telling you a bit about my background. And also I'll illustrate some of the points by a bit of my experience of life as well, just briefly, because my experience might help to illustrate the points. And also we can do some thinking together about it. So I think that's it. I'm on the National Steering Committee for the Power Threat Meaning Framework. I've got a chapter in a book coming out in November. I keep forgetting about that, on trauma-informed approaches to workforce development around homelessness, comparing America and England and various other things. But let's crack on with something useful. But it just helps to orientate you to a bit of my background. I've been very interested in trauma-informed approaches. So I'm going to talk you through these 6 questions, and I'm going to share my PowerPoint for a little bit. I'll stop sharing and we'll have a chat about it. But if you have a pen, that would be helpful, and a bit of paper. If you don't, you can always make a note on your smartphone. And if you don't, just think for yourself, and you've probably got a better memory than me. So think about yourself, and I'm going to ask you 6 questions about a quest that you're on. And it could be any simple thing. The first question is, how would you like your life to be better in the future? So what I'd suggest is, it can be those kind of, resolution type things where you think, well, I'd like to be a bit more financially stable. That's probably me thinking out loud. That's what I'd like to be. But it could be lose weight. It could be get fit, lose, a musical instrument, learn a musical instrument, stop smoking, or anything like that. Some way in which you'd like your life to be better in the future is the first question. And there are 6 simple questions. And then from that, we can see that we can go into a lot of depth. And I'll do this as well, because it's good to do. There's no them and us, is there? We want to, anything we suggest is useful. We want to apply to ourselves. Otherwise, it can get a little bit them and usy, don't it? We're trying to avoid that. So that's the first question. Have a think about that. Some way in which you'd like your life to be. You might want a better job, move house, maybe live in a nicer house, things like that. Anyway, whatever it is. So let me share. And I'll do this fairly quickly so that we can get onto a bit more of the, just bear with me. Share. So for some reason, I was going to share my PowerPoint, but with this worked earlier. Maybe I have to click off this recording. Your consent to being included. I wonder. So what I'm trying to do, Shelley, is we tried this earlier and it worked perfectly well. So now when I click share, it won't. His Teams not behaving itself. So sometimes Teams doesn't behave itself, does it? Did you try to make me the host? Maybe if you undo that, Shelley.
I didn't actually end up doing that because.
Yeah. So when we chatted earlier. Let's just see if it's anything to do with this. We tried this. It's not the end of the world if this doesn't work. Aha! It somehow accidentally fixed it. Here we go.
Amazing.
Wow. Accidents happen, don't they? Here we go. Accidentally fixed it. So hopefully now play from the start. This would be great if you can hear me. That's me, Ray Middleton, and I do some training and stuff. I'm going to click through these a bit. These are different kinds of things I do about facilitating group reflective practice and pre-treatments approach from America, PI, and narrative. But we're going to chip through this. That's the Power Threat Meaning Framework. What I want to do is, I've had some 5-day program evaluated by the University of Lincoln. They thought it was really good and made a big difference to people, staff, working with people with multiple disadvantage. But I'm deliberately clicking through these because I want to get to this narrative idea. And this is the first question. So drawing on things like solution-focused kind of ideas and other ideas like narrative ideas, the idea can be about how would you like your life to be better in the future, or you could say, what are your best hopes for the future, or you can phrase that in any kind of language that resonates well in the language and the culture of the person that you're working with, or we can think about ourselves. And that's the kind of question. And you'll see the image has these 6 questions on. So this is just the top right-hand corner, and eventually you'll see the whole image. So visually, I've got that as a mountain that we might want to go on. So the next question is, you know, what's in the way? Otherwise, you'd have achieved that already. So if you think about the thing, the way you'd like your life to be better in the future, what is in the way? You know, so yeah. Different things. I was kind of just, you know, like I could do a bit more training, income kind of thing, you know. So, but that's because the thing I want. But it might be all sorts of things. If I want to learn an instrument, it might be that I don't know a trainer, you know, someone to teach me that, or it could be absolutely anything. Visually, it's rocks and some things. Then the next question could be, well, what emotions get stirred up? So it could be like when you think about this quest, a journey in life, trying to change, achieve something, want something. You could think, well, what emotions? So it could be you enjoying the process. It could be other mixed emotions. You could have fear of failure. You could be stressed about it. You could feel annoyed. You could feel mixed feelings like, I don't know whether I want to go on this quest. I don't know whether I can achieve it. Yeah. Okay. And again, I'm going to deliberately move at some pace here just so that we get into some more depths with this and a bit of an interesting chat. See what you think. But you could spend a bit of time there, couldn't you? Say, what emotions? So, okay. Does anything or anybody help you or could help you on this journey? Hmm. Right. Yeah. So again, you could spend 5 minutes chatting about that. You could be chilled out and you could kind of explore that a bit. But the thing about narrative approaches is we co-edit, we co-create these narratives with other people. And so if we're helping someone else, we could chat for a while or briefly about it, because you can be relaxed because you can always go back and change your mind. You can add something later, can't you? If something you don't think of now. So then there's 6 questions, but they're just the first 4 of the 6 questions, and it's the top half of this postcard. I tend to print out as a postcard. You could print it out if you want as well. Don't worry about the symbols just yet, because I'll explain them shortly. But you could see so far what we've kind of said is, well, a little where you could write in what your best hopes for the future, what and who helps, and what's in the way. And that's really a very simple idea, isn't it? But you could apply that to lots of things. You know, if you want to become a trauma-informed organization, you could have the narrative, not about an individual, but about the story could be about an organization. You want to go on a journey, and the top of the mountain would be your really well-informed, trauma-informed organization. But there are some things that are getting in the way, and there are some things that help. And it stirs up some emotions for the staff, doesn't it? They might be on their knees, really burnt out. And when you suggest this, people might be saying, oh, no, not another task, another thing to do. And that might be something, the thing that gets in the way is kind of workforce, compassion fatigue, burnout, being stretched. Other things might get in the way. So you see what I've done there is that although we're thinking about ourselves to illustrate it, we could also think about a journey, and it could help to visualize that for an organization going on a journey to become trauma informed. And it's going to stir up some emotions. You might be hopeful that it will help, but then you might think, wow, is this another thing to do? And then lots of other things might get in the way. I'm going to just move us on a little bit then. Actually, I'll tell you what the other 3, I'll come back to this in a minute, but I'll tell you what the last 2 questions are, which is, what's the story so far? So the thing you were thinking about, you'll have made some progress on that journey. So in a sentence, what would you say the progress? Obviously, the thing I'm thinking about, I've made loads of progress recently, but you might be nearly at the end of your quest and almost know how to play the guitar or whatever it is. Or you might be just starting off, or you might want to get a qualification, or you might want to get a certain kind of job, whatever the quest is. And we always have lots of these quests kind of going on at the same time. Some of them can be quite short-term, small quests. Some of them can be big quests. But in a sentence, how would you describe the story so far, the journey so far? Okay. Again, If you had longer, you can go back and add many more sentences to that. But I'm just going to let us know what the last question is. So drawing on lots of different ideas about motivating people, motivational interviewing, and some solution focused and some other kinds of ideas. The idea would be just what would be your next step that you could do today, tomorrow, or this week? It doesn't matter how small it is that you could do to go a little bit on that journey. Doesn't matter how small it is. Just write down what could be your next step. Okay. So what I might do now, that's nice. Cool little picture with all those images. Glasses going around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a bit more depth about some of these areas, but I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and just chat to people and see what you think so far. So I'm going to stop sharing. Can you hear me okay? Could you see the images okay? Could you hear me talking? So I'm aware that people might be very familiar with some of these approaches, and also it can sound quite simple, which I think is great, because what you want to do is, there's this Russian thinker called Vygotsky, who some people will be familiar with here, a Russian developmental psychologist. And what he would say, although I'm oversimplifying him probably, is you want to get where people are at first, and then if you're going to help them, you want to develop, you want to stretch them a little bit, but you don't want to stretch them too much or you'll lose them. That's my kind of summary of his ideas. And I try to avoid jargon, but what he calls that is the zone of proximal development, meaning wherever I'm at now, there's this zone where I could grow into. But if you stretch me too much, I'm going to like switch off, think, oh, that's too complicated, or it's too hard, or you've lost me. So I'm really keen on any kind of frameworks or models that are easy to understand. I want to be able to understand it myself. I want the person I'm working with to understand it. I don't think frameworks are very helpful if they're hard and complicated or use long words. Some long words are helpful, but you need to translate it into the language of everyday ordinary lived life. So some concepts can be helpful, and some things that are difficult to understand can be helpful, but they're not helpful if they're kind of turned into jargon that are kind of used without reaching out and considering the person you're talking to. So that's why I'm keen on this, and I just did a visual image. Oh, I could share the final visual image with you. It won't take me a second, seeing as it's working now. Oh, sorry, pressed the wrong thing. Let's go back again. Stop sharing. This won't take a second. I'm just going to share the final postcard so you can see it all together. I'm sure I put this on here somewhere. There we go. So as a kind of post-sized shape, this is the final image you get to, and I'm kind of sharing an image of this, and I'm pretty sure I have one without the symbols in, which might be better sometimes, or might be okay with this, but you might want to use it without the symbols as well with somebody, and I'll try and dig that out from wherever I keep these things, share that as well. We could share it later. I'll explain what these symbols mean as we go along, but you can see that there's somebody going on a journey, and what can happen if we just kind of look at the bottom half of this. At the bottom half, the story so far, we asked that question, and the sixth question, my next steps. But actually, can you see that instead of my next steps, the next step sometimes can be quicksand? Can you see that in the bottom right-hand corner of this image? And so sometimes people get stuck on their journey in life, don't they? We get stuck in habits, and sometimes that's reacting to trauma. It can be other things get us stuck. It's not always reacting to trauma, but it can be very common. That's a helpful kind of metaphor on the journey of life. To sometimes we got stuck. The other thing that can help, we see those trees and that dead end. Sometimes we get sidetracked, don't we? So instead of taking a positive next step on our journey of life, we could sometimes get stuck because life gets busy, or we get stuck in a habit, or we might get stuck for reasons that aren't anything to do with us. We might not have, there might be things that are outside our control, have more power over us, and that's why we get stuck. So common narrative plot might be that I've got stuck, or sometimes trapped is a popular narrative. People feel trapped in a job that's like, I'm not enjoying this job, or I feel trapped in a relationship, and there might be domestic violence, or I feel, or people might feel, well, I've got sidetracked. I did want to become a nurse, but somehow I've become a chef. I got sidetracked along this, and 10 years have passed. So commonly, we try to make sense of our life and our experiences of life by fitting them into a narrative, and there's lots of different narratives out there. And I'm just kind of using some very, very popular and common ones in our culture, can be very helpful ones, to think. People might think, oh, I've got stuck, and what would help me get unstuck? Or I've got sidetracked, what would help me get back on track? My next steps. And to do that, we probably want some kind of idea about those 6 questions. You don't need to use exactly all 6 questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing and just get a little bit of interaction from everybody here to see whether so far, does it make sense? I'm going to then go into a bit more depth and related to trauma, but I can answer any questions. Tom?
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. I think, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Oh, good, yeah. I was going to say, I like the emotion bits as well, because I think sometimes we can be all focused on intelligence. So my thing was not saving enough money. So someone could be tempted to explain to me, do you not understand that if you save money, you know, like in an it's like I'm not clever enough. Whereas I get the concept. And I sometimes think in the world of social work, that's where I would criticize myself and other social workers sometimes. So when a parent isn't doing something different, we kind of think, oh, it's about her intelligence, whereas it's often not. It's often, and I just like how the tool allows you to kind of not just be focused on intelligence.
Yeah, lovely. That's a really good point, Tom. And I'm glad you said that. Because also what I realized is sometimes the thing that was really blocking me in life was my feelings, my emotions. And no amount of intellectual kind of rationalizing was actually going to shift that. I mean, so we can start to then think about the kind of culture that we live in, because there are some powerful sets of ideas out there. And you don't have to agree with me about any of this, but I'll just share what my current thinking is. I do change my mind about things over time, but at the moment I'm thinking we live in a culture that really kind of value, thinks that reason is really powerful. And if you could just think up some good reasons, like this is a good reason to stop smoking, that you might get lung cancer, that's going to motivate people to change. And I just don't think reason is that powerful, because what other things are more powerful that connect to our emotions. I'm not against reason. I just think it's overvalued in our culture. So people think, let's think of this good reason. And then we're thinking, how come it's so difficult? And so I think what motivates us is we're more emotional and relational and ethical beings. And we're not just rational beings. And so we have to kind of somehow avoid that dominant idea about reason being the way forward. And like you just said, let me explain to you, Tom, about saving money. Well, I'd be the last person to talk about. But, to me, people could be saying, Ray, this is what you should do. Well, that can be helpful. I'm not against it. But if we instead, about the future, what you'd like in the future, what can be helpful is to tap into people's values. What do you value? So particularly what's helpful, and this is, I'm drawing on lots of different sets of ideas here, but often people will want something which is a negative, like I don't want to feel anxious anymore. It's common, but it's more helpful to reframe that with someone into a positive. So you can acknowledge that, and validating people, particularly people who've experienced a lot of trauma, have a lot of those adverse childhood experiences or unresolved trauma in their life. It's good to be validating, because often people have had neglect where they haven't been validated. So we can validate where people are at, and you say, so you'd like to be rid of anxiety, for example. I'm just using an example at the top of the mountain there, but that's probably not going to motivate you to do the difficult work of change, because change is difficult, and change in itself provokes anxiety, doesn't it? So instead, what you really want to do is move the desire to overcome anxiety to the what's in the way section. There are 6 sections there, and you say, well, what is anxiety getting in the way of? And what you're looking for is something that people want, which is a positive value in their life. They might say, well, I'd really like to be a good granddad. And if I wasn't so anxious, like I'd be able to kind of get on public transport, or I'd be able to see more of my grandchildren. So people might want to fulfill a family role. And not just anxiety, you can do this with anything. So people say, I'd like to be, my goal is to be rid of alcohol and drugs. I want to be clean, whatever phrase people are using. I know you've got to think about the language about this, but you want to use the language that people are using themselves, because you want to enter their world and you want to resonate well, use the phrases and metaphors they're using. So if someone says, I'd like to be free of this alcohol and drugs, we can acknowledge that's a really good goal and it's really important to you. But you could say, well, so what's drinking excessively getting in the way of? And then they might, first of all, people might say, I ain't got a clue. Or, if people are very, with high levels of trauma and lots of complexity and lots of disadvantage, might struggle to think about that. But eventually they might think, well, it's getting in the way of me becoming a chef. Years ago, I wanted to become a chef. And so do you see how we can get where people are at? And what we're trying to do is get a positive value at the top there of the goal. And people might struggle if you've got like lots and lots of difficulties going on. What some people with very high levels of unresolved trauma and lots of chaos going on in their life and lots of difficulties, what their experience might be more like, I feel crap. Apologies for my language, but they haven't got the language to name. I feel guilt and shame and a mixture of fear and anxiety and resentment about some bad stuff that happened to me. They're not going to articulate it like that, are they? They're going to say, I feel crap and I just don't want to feel crap. So my drive is to get hold of some heroin, maybe, or some alcohol, or to stay in my flat, maybe. It might not be to do with alcohol and drugs. My drive is to not feel awful, so I'm staying in my flat. And that makes sense because it makes them feel safe. It's a way to survive, but then it gets worse. It kind of works to survive in the short term. It doesn't work in the long term. So I suppose I'm just picking on what Tom said, and I'll come to James in a second. And I'm kind of building on that a little bit to think, yeah, emotions are in there because sometimes part of the problem is not being able to name the emotion, and it just allows a bit of thinking about that. At least the question's there. Visually, it's a body of water. We can be curious about that. We can share some of our language about emotions, because I know for me, I'm someone who had a lot of trauma in my childhood, and then I ended up as a teenager, I used alcohol and drugs to excess to try and survive as a threat response, which is very typical. And then in my early 20s, I ended up in the psychiatric hospital as an inpatient, and that happened. I got stuck in a cycle on my journey. So on that visual image there, the quicksand, I got stuck in a cycle of going in and out of psychiatric hospital. I got stuck also in that kind of idea about the biomedical model of mental health. Like I got lots of diagnosis of mental disorders, and I kind of believed them for a while until I found other ways to get better, kind of more trauma-informed ways to get unstuck and get on with my life and meet some people who believed that I could get better. And I got a life, and we want people to get a life, don't we? And I was very fortunate, and I ended up being motivated then to work in this sector. So what I'm saying there is it's helpful to have a space, but we don't need to have, we can explore it a bit with people. I didn't have any of the language to say I felt angry and resentful and anxious, and, until I was in my 20s. Then I learned some emotional language to sort of talk about how I felt. But my driver was how I felt. So, Tom, I think it's great what you're saying about emotions. It's good to have a little space to think about that. We can think, I'm linking it now to some trauma-informed type ideas. I may have very strong emotions, but I may not have the language. But at least if it's there, I can think of a body of water. I start the process off. I remember a GP once asking me, was I angry? And I said, oh, no. I mean, I was really furious, but I hadn't got a clue. I just thought, well, I'm not. I wasn't in touch. I didn't know what to say. But I later on in life, I thought, oh, yeah, I do get angry. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just illustrating a bit of the picture by sharing a bit of my personal experience, and also building on what Tom said about linking it to values might motivate me if there's something positive value that I want. Anyway, I'm gonna ask Tom what he thinks about what I said, and then I'm gonna ask James to come in.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thanks. Yeah, and yeah. Just to repeat, I think when I think about to a lot of my social work, it'd be like, right, this mum hasn't done this thing. And I think too often, so rather than trying to connect to it's probably mum probably understands the thing. So no, thanks for that, Ray.
Thanks, yeah. And I was long-term unemployed, and so people used to say things to me about that. Like I wanted a job, I had a work ethic, but I was years unemployed because I was chaotic. So I used to know people think, Ray, you should have a job. Well, yeah, there are some good reasons why I didn't have a job, and it wasn't because I didn't want one. Actually, it was because I had a lot going on and a lot of a chaotic life, and I had lots of different, so there was a way forward, but sometimes so I felt a lot of judgment. I was imagining people are judging me a lot, and they were judging me, I suppose, because they thought X, Y, and Z about me. So yeah, what other people, we probably have a good guess at what other people are thinking, and some of that is probably judgment. So that means I don't really want to talk about this because I think It can stir up shame as well. So you want to do this sensitively when you think about how would you like your life to be better in the future, because often it can stir up shame. Because I think, well, it's good to articulate what you want, but then if I haven't worked for years, it can be like the emotion that gets stirred up when someone helpful in a helping role comes along, quite rightly tries to encourage me to think about how I'd like my life to be better. Shame's not talked about a lot, and shame's really good to think about. So it's a sensitive way to say, yeah, Ray, you could have said that to me when my 20s, So it sounds like you'd really like a job and, like in a relationship. That's what I wanted, the two things I wanted. And there's probably good reasons why that's been really difficult, but I wonder if we could think together about kind of the steps to kind of, maybe you need a bit more support or some skills or maybe some help to kind of overcome some of the things that get in the way of you getting a job, because it sounds really valuable to you. You'd really like a job. And then you could build on that because you're co-creating and valuing and agreeing that that's a good value to aim at. And now let's think about why that's difficult. And partly why it's difficult is because we're emotional and we've got these other things. Thank you, Tom. James.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Hiya. I clicked my hand and then I unclicked it and then I clicked it again. Because I wasn't sure whether you'd get to this in the talk anyway, but I thought I tend to jump in anyway. So here's me jumping. I like the simplicity of it, and I do agree with you and Mr. Vygotsky. I like that. But what I was struck with is the tendency that we sometimes have to sort of fall in love with the process and go, wow, yes, 6-point plan, boom, 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 excellent, off I go, zoom. And so I just wanted to chip in and talk a little bit about the pace at which we use the tool, the importance of, here I am gabbling on, the importance of silence, the importance to pause within this and hear people's stories before going to the potential solutions, in gaining trust. And as as you were saying, this is informed not just by my experience with other families, but also with my personal experience. And I've been struck by how amazing it is to be well listened to.
Yeah, great. Thank you, James. Yeah. And so I think that's really helpful. So what I'd suggest is, and that's why it says my next steps rather than what is the 27-point plan to get there, is because, so linking this to some trauma theory, the idea, a lot of research into people healing from trauma, because people heal from trauma every day, don't they? It's very common. It's normal. People can and do recover from trauma and they heal. So it's good to know that, and there's lots of different ways to do that. But one of the common themes that comes out is typically one of the reactions people have had to lots of trauma is a feeling that I'm powerless, that I don't have much power in my life. Understandably, powerful things have happened to me. Like when I was a kid, powerful things happened to me. I didn't have much control over them. And then I reacted to that powerful stuff. But when you're a kid, you don't have a lot of power, do you? A lot of options. So understandably, people start to think, I don't have much agency. It doesn't matter if I try really hard to solve this problem or get on with my life, but bad things are going to happen is a typical idea maybe that I form. Or I don't. And so one of the common themes about recovery and healing is that people shift into a new narrative where I get some more agency. Agency just meaning personal power, that I have some more personal agency, that I could do something today that makes a difference to tomorrow. And so that's why I think sometimes, I mean, there's nothing wrong with planning if you want to make a plan, but a really long plan can just be overwhelming. So what I'm hoping with that kind of image and the simple 6 questions is there's a lot of pivot points where you could actually, you may start to think, well, you might want to be a chef, but you might change your mind. You might think, actually, I've gone a little bit on this journey and I've even applied and I've done a bit of the course, but now I've decided that's not for me, and that's okay. Or, there are opportunities to talk about things, and you might meet people at one of those 6 areas that's more important than the others, and you can spend time. So the pace is really important, and it's not a kind of a quick fix idea. It's just a structure. But what you could do, and I'll share a little bit more about this to kind of take us into a little bit more depth with this, which might be useful, particularly as someone mentioned the Power Threat Meaning Framework, is in any of those 6 questions, you can go and enrich that area by asking some follow-up questions. So that's, well, narrative therapy kind of talks about that, but this isn't narrative therapy. I've drawn on lots of different kinds of ideas, but also solution focused stuff would talk about that, and other ideas. All of these ideas are always borrowing ideas from someone else as well, aren't they? It's not that these ideas pop fully formed from nowhere. They're a dialogue that kind of, and they get rehashed, and then some of these ideas are really good. But so you want to kind of use the good stuff and kind of ignore the stuff that's unhelpful. So what I would say, this is the idea that's useful, is once I roughly establish what might be someone, be curious with someone and lend my capacity to be curious by asking them those 6 questions in any kind of order. And it doesn't need to be, I mean, often people will talk to me about a problem saturated kind of way by saying, Ray, I'm a smackhead or something, and then nothing, you know, that's their starting point. So I can validate that. I'm not agreeing with them, I'm validating them. I'm saying, so you feel you're a smackhead and you'll, nothing will amount to you. You don't think there's any point going on. So they feel listened to and we're connecting. And I'm validating their starting narrative. I'm a smackhead. Nothing will ever, I'll never amount to anything. And then we can pivot a bit and think, oh, so do you mean like, am I right in understanding that you feel that you're using too much heroin? And what's that getting in the way of? Is there anything that you ever wanted? And you can sort of try to develop a bit of a narrative about something positive. It might take a bit of time. But you can ask follow-up questions. So the way, I hope by the end of today, you can go away with some useful stuff, and you can remember it by the first 5 letters of the alphabet, because I never like to have anything more than 5 usually. So A, B, C, D, E. So I'll see if I can land a plane, and they all stand for something as a mnemonic, because I've got a bad memory. You might remember them better, and they are at the top of the image as well, A, B, C, D, E, and each letter stands for 2 things, because I'm always slightly cheating a bit, because although I say it's 5 things, it's 10 things, isn't it? You can cheat a bit and think it stands for more things. You're trying to fit more things in. So for about a few minutes, not very long, I'll just share a little bit more as an example. So you could go into what and who helps. And as someone said to me, who was without a home at the time, they said, nobody helps me. Nobody helps me. I'm always, and the things that are getting in the way is the police and the probation. They hate me. And I've been here lots of times. I've just come out of prison. And so that's your starting point. I could say, so you feel like nobody's helping you. That's okay. But that might not be entirely true. It might be what they believe at the time and what they're communicating to me. They might want help from me. So they're saying to me, and they kind of believe it at the time, and they're stressed. So they're not doing the best thinking, are they? And the best communicating is what kind of polyvagal theory would tell us about the vagus nerve. If they're stressed, if I was homeless and, you know, feeling threatened and on the streets, I'd be very stressed. So I was saying, nobody helps me. So once I'd validated that, I could go in and say, has this ever happened before? When it's happened before, did anybody help you at all? Can you think of it? So once he's relaxed a bit and he's less tense and he sees that I'm listening to him, he said, well, there is Joe helped me, you know, from the Cyrenians. And, or, you know, whoever, and the Simon community, it was, I think. And then there was someone else, and it ended up being 4 people and 4 organizations that tend to help him. And he said, but it's a battle. So we can use the metaphors of the culture and the language of the person we're chatting to. We can tune into those phrases and language and metaphors and build on them. So I said, it's a battle. And then do you see how the narrative slightly changed as we were chatting to each other? There was a bit of trust built up. And he said, so it's a battle. And okay, the things that are getting in the way, in his point of view, were the probation and the police. They may have been, I don't know, but I'm just listening. But that's how he felt. And the things that might help him were these 4 organizations. And so it became, we're saying, oh, that's a battle. And you want to win this battle and not go back to prison, is what you're saying. So where would you like to go? And you can see how that phrases. So you could pick on any of those areas and enrich it. And that way, we cannot go on a quest in our life without other people believing in us and being a champion. Or there's a guy who's done a lot of research into post-traumatic growth, Richard Tedeschi, about how people grow through their traumas. About 2/3 of people report this, that we grow and we have more compassion, and there's lots of different ways we might grow through. And about 1/3 of people don't report that. But one of the common things that people who report post-traumatic growth say is that they had what Richard Tedeschi calls an expert companion in their life. Now, you don't need to call it an expert companion, that's his phrase, but it's someone in our life who listens to why we're stuck, why we're getting sidetracked, believes in us, helps us to, listens to us, is validating, helps us to maybe reframe it, helps us to keep going, not give up, not despair, share some hope with us, helps us to make sense of it and then move on with our life. And we might be in that role of expert companion, even if we don't call ourselves an expert companion. When either with friends or family or with people we're working with in a professional role, we reach out and we listen to people. We have that privilege of journeying with people for a little while. And we might listen, we might have this in our heads, journey. And we probably want to be in that helpful role, don't we? When we was what helps, we can think about, well, where do I lie in this? What can I do in our role? And we don't want to be in that re-traumatizing role of getting in the way as much as possible. We might accidentally be there. But so we're hoping to be helpful on their journey, but we're trying to find out what is the journey they want to go on, first of all, rather than me assuming that they may not want to be free from drugs. They may want something else, but it's finding out what they want is their motivation. And everybody's motivated for something. So it's worth finding out. They might not be motivated for the thing my service is paid to kind of do. But if you find out what they are motivated for, we could probably find a bit of a fit between what I can offer. So we can choose any of those 6 areas and we can enrich and we can add in some extra questions. And what I'm going to do, we're doing okay for time. I'm going to share a few minutes of the image again, and I'll say what we could ask about. I mean, I wouldn't ask about all these things, but for the purposes of being useful and helpful, I'm going to talk about power and the power threat meaning framework. And what you could think about, power is a good positive thing as well as it can be a negative thing. Power can harm, but power can help. So what the power threat meaning framework would say is a strengths-based approach. It's a narrative approach. I'm only going to touch on it here. There's lots to it, but it would say that power is really important to think about. And we could think about what powerful things are getting in the way. But let's not do that for a minute. We could think about what powerful things are helping. Or the language of the framework would say, what access to powerful resources have you got on your journey? So we could think about that. When we thought about the example for ourselves, you could think, all right, what access to powerful resources? What and who helps me? And then if I was chatting to someone else, we could suggest a few things. So I'm going to suggest a few things. I wouldn't do this with someone and go through all this because it'd be a bit overwhelming, but I'm going to share it for our purposes. So I'm going to share the screen again and just talk about different kinds of power, because we might help someone access a powerful resource that helps them on their journey, helps them get unstuck, helps them not be sidetracked, and helps them get the thing that they want, whether that's to become a nurse, a chef, or to get a relationship, or not feel lonely, or to learn a bicycle, or to learn a foreign language, or go to an art class, or whatever it is they want. We might not be able to, and that's a good conversation to have about being boundaried and saying, well, because you're a powerful resource, and as soon as someone's talking to you, a friend, a family member, or someone using the service, if you're in a professional role, you're a powerful resource and they've got access to you, and they've also got access to everything that you've got access to, because you might be able to go and ask a colleague, look, how does someone become a chef in Plymouth? Where's the college? Is there any grants? So when someone accesses you through a conversation, they've got access to a powerful resource, which is you. You're a powerful resource, and you've got access to other powerful resources, your colleagues, the internet, all sorts of things, information, knowledge, and you might be able to, there are limits to it, but you might be able to help them access powerful resources, which is a strength that they've got then into. So let me share this image and I'll explain a little bit about power. Here we go. So hopefully you can still hear me. And we'll just go back to this image. So what and who helps? And so if someone says, well, nobody's helping me, I used an example of that, didn't I? You could say, okay, so you feel nobody helping you. But then you could think, well, maybe not. Or maybe there is someone that could help in the future. And you might have some ideas about that. And you could open up a dialogue and say, I'm just wondering whether this person might help people who want to become chefs, this employment advisor maybe, or this grant for people in Plymouth who want to become a chef. You might add something into the dialogue that they don't know. That's why I don't believe all the answers lie within somebody, because you might have the answer that there's a grant for people who want to become chefs, and they don't know that. It doesn't matter how much inward looking, searching someone does, they're not going to know there's a grant in Plymouth for people under 25 who want to become chefs. You might know that bit of information, or any kind of bit of information that you know that they don't know. So that's why some of the solutions lie outside of people. They might lie within you, and you might be able to share that with them, or it might lie within a third person, or a website, something. So there are different kinds of powerful things that might help. And these images I've kind of put on here is just a little mnemonic. So not a mnemonic, yeah, it's a kind of symbol. It's a mnemonic, it's a way to remember something, isn't it? So the pound sign, can you see that on the left? That stands for economic power. So would some money help you on this quest? So clearly, if it's to save money, then money would help it on the quest. But it might be all sorts of quests people want to go on to become a chef, or to whatever it is. If you think about the thing you wanted, not everything requires money, but quite a lot of things might need some money. So if there's a grant or some personalization or some access to money or a loan or something like that, there might be something that helps people on their journey. Sometimes people have a social network of friends and family, and someone may be able to lend them some money to get some lessons or to get a job, and then they can generate their own money. But it's worth thinking about economic power. But as well as economic power, you see that the house and the car there just as a reminder of material power. So rather than money, we could think about, has someone got a home that helps them, a safe place to go out from on their quest? You might be working with someone without a home. Have they got transport? Have they got a bus pass? Have they got? Can they get on the bus? Is there any barriers to that? Have they got a smartphone? Have they got access to the internet? Have they got? We can think about, are there any material, powerful things that might help? Even if they haven't, can they access maybe a computer and get on the internet by going to the library? Or what are the ways to kind of think about that? So we could think about, would material things help me on this quest? But then we can think about legal power. Do you see the scale standing for legal power? So with some quests, it's not that relevant. It's just a reminder that that's a different kind of power than economic and material power. And the Power Threat Meaning Framework would talk about all these different kinds of power. And it might be a helpful prompt to open up a dialogue, not about maybe all of these things, but one or two of them might seem relevant to enrich the idea. So it might be that you've got a legal right to something. You might have a legal right to some benefit that you were not aware of, and suddenly you've got some economic power coming through. Then there's at the top there, so the legal power might help you. There's people, interpersonal power might help you. That's the thing we tend to think a lot about in our culture. In things like therapy, that tends to be the thing that people think about the most. But there's these other kinds of power. And it might be really important. Have you got any friends or family that might help you? Is there any people, any services and paid staff, any voluntary services that could help you? The next one along, the group of people, is social power. Are there any groups that could help you? So what do we mean by that? Well, if you want to lose weight, do you want to go to Slimming World? Some people find that really helpful. It's not that everybody finds that helpful. If you want to stop using drugs, do you want to go to Narcotics Anonymous? It's not that everybody finds Narcotics Anonymous helpful on their quest to not use drugs, but some people do, don't they? Even if I don't kind of think that's that helpful, it might be this other person does, and it's part of their journey that they go there and they stop using drugs and they meet some friends. They meet people with a similar value about staying away from drugs, so they have some company with people. Or it could be that the thing that's really I'm stuck in is grief about the death of a loved one, and I go to a grief support group online. That's a group that will help me, peer support groups. There's lots of groups. People might have a faith experience and go to a faith group. People might have go to all sorts of groups to not be lonely. They might go to a cinema group. So it's about the power of the group, belonging. People want to belong, and that could help me. There might be a group of people who want to go on this quest. People who are getting together, maybe to learn a language or a musical instrument or something. Who knows? 2 more points about power, and then we'll have a little chat amongst ourselves, and we'll make sure we have a comfort break as well soon. The heart stands for embodied power. Yeah. So if I'm good at sport, if I'm physically strong, that's powerful, isn't it? There might be some biological embodied power that's helps you on your way. It might be that I can get up, I can walk around, maybe that's a power into that. I can get myself into town, I can walk around. And some of these things people might be taking for granted when they're feeling powerless and think, I have nothing. I think, hang on a minute. I am able to do these things. So we can think about that. And that could also stand a little bit for the kind of physical environment as well. There might be things in the physical environment, like spaces to go, parks, or being able to get down by the sea, that helps me on my way. If I'm on a quest that's quite difficult, there might be times I can go to the park or get into nature, walk by the harbour, which help me to have those restful times on that quest, because I can't be working at it all the time. That might help. And the final thing with the light bulb is about the power of ideas, powerful sets of ideas. And some of those powerful ideas might help. I might look on YouTube and find some personal stories about people recovering from the difficulty, the thing I'm having difficulty with, overcoming that. People who've achieved the quest, people talking about their giving their testimony about maybe overcoming long-term unemployment and getting a job, or about overcoming some difficulty around grief, or so, all sorts of things. So there's powerful ideas out there that I might be helpful, beliefs, experiences, things I believe. People can and do recover from trauma. That might be helpful to kind of, as a powerful idea to kind of come across, see the evidence for that, think, oh, that's helping me. So the powerful ideas. So there's 7 different kinds of power. And on the journey, final point here before we go and chat about it in the bigger group is, for some people, what would help me on my journey is some more skills. And that might be true. So if you think about your quest, how you'd like your last regret in the future, thing you thought about, well, would some more skills help me? And it might help to learn a few skills. It depends on the quest, doesn't it? And that might be worth enriching, as well as thinking about what powerful things might help me. And we might add to things. Or for some people, it's not skills so much as support. They need a bit of support, someone else to help them, some embodied person to go with them to that group for the first time. And some people need a bit of both. Some people need more support and less skills. Some people need more skills and more support. So you can think about that together with someone. It's not that we're right, but it's worth thinking, is this the kind of quest that needs some skills and that would help? Or is this the kind of quest that needs some support? Who could support with that? It might not be you. So that was a whistle stop talk. I'm going to stop sharing, see what people think, and then probably shortly we'll have a comfort break as well, and then I can go into some other things after the break. Hopefully they're useful. What I'll try to do there is just pick on one area of the 6 areas and just say, we could enrich that by asking about power. What access to powerful resources have you got? What strengths have you got? It's a great question, what strengths have you got? But usually it's quite individualistic in our culture. You know, am I courageous, brave, I persevere? Well, that's great. That's a strength. But maybe I've got a friend with a van. That's a strength that I have, because I have a friend with a van. So even though I don't have a van, if I want to move my bit of furniture, the friend with a van is a strength. Do you see what I mean? It's a social network. It's a different, more social network way of thinking, a more social way of thinking than the individualistic culture we have in a kind of consumer capitalist culture. The thinking very much in the culture goes individualistic, like it's all strengths in me, or what's wrong with me, instead of, well, if I get more access to like friends, families, groups, social groups, maybe someone's got a van, they could help me. So any comments about this, or any questions? Did it make sense in terms of like different kinds of power? Anybody want to comment or ask me a question about this? Do you think you could use that to enrich the what helps area of a quest narrative? By kind of just being, I wouldn't like bombard someone with all those different kinds of power, and you've got to find a language that resonates in their world, you know. But you could think, oh, so it would help you. It sounds like what would really help is you need a bit of input, injection of cash. You know, you're saying you're motivated and you do want this thing. Shelley.
Yeah, that's what I love, Ray, that rebalancing it away from everything being fault of the individual. Like quite often individuals are in that space because of something in the social sphere. Yeah. And I think helping them recognize that takes that shift of shame and blame away from them. Some people have been done unto really unfairly, and that is a reason for the situation they find themselves in. It's not all their fault, you know. Same as it's not all their responsibility to get out of it on their own.
Absolutely. Yeah. The reason I've got stuck and sidetracked might be for some people nothing I had any power over. Something that happened. You know, if I had a partner who had a problem with gambling addiction and they spent all the money and then I'm homeless because we got made homeless, I might have not known anything about it. Now I'm homeless. It wasn't like some moral failing in my part. And that doesn't stop us thinking, well, actually, some of my habits might be contributing to me being stuck in this cycle. We can think about that, but we're also trying to think about, we can think about both things. Someone popped their hand up. It was was it Nancy?
Thank you. Yeah, I really liked how there's a kind of reframing about power that you're doing in this sort of ordinariness of some of it, because when you feel overwhelmed or that you don't have any agency, you think that applies to every area of your life. But like, I love the idea of the man with the van. Like there are things that we can reframe as giving us power, that allows us to, you know, that sort of biting away at the apple thing, that change and a reclaiming of power is incremental. It doesn't have to be the big things. It can be my neighbour with a van today and then next year a home, for example, you know. And I think that's a really I like how leveling it is, how accessible it is, because as professionals, which I'm presuming most of us in this room are, we can have a tendency to professionalize, over professionalize every conversation or engagement that we have with people, and that may actually be quite misattuned.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. That's a really helpful to share. Yeah, and it did make me think that it's a reframing. It's about trying to see things, that I have access to lots of powerful things. I'm not saying that in a glossy way, but in small ways, thinking, do you know what? There are things it might build my motivation. It's trying to get away from the dominant culture of individualism, that either I've chosen to be a millionaire or I've chosen to be a homeless, as someone said recently. That's not the case, is it? We're thinking, right, what access to powerful resources have I got? And maybe I've got access to someone with some powerful things. And then it does help me reframe. I'm going to be more motivated. Because I think when I'm stressed and when I'm facing powerful threats, so all of those types of power I talked about there, you could also think about in the other section, which is what's in the way. And the phrase would be, what powerful threats am I facing? And so there might be some powerful threats in terms of my worried about getting into debt, about losing some material things that I have, like my laptop or my home, and becoming homeless. There might be some legal threats to me. There might be, no recourse to public funds, maybe, if I'm in that status, or all sorts of legal threats I might have. There might be interpersonal threats from other people. There might be threats from a group, maybe not belonging to that group, being expelled from that group, maybe if I want to be part of it. There might be physical threats, like my physical illness. I've got a physical illness, maybe, and that's a threat because I'm worried about the future. Will I lose my job because I'm unwell, etc.? And there might be some ideological threats, powerful ideas that are like threats to me, like particularly a lot of those prejudice stuff, like in the air, in the culture. And I might see that as a threat as well, those powerful ideas about, oh, you're just a addict, or you're just homeless, or and you'll never amount to anything. So equally, all of those things, we can just in our head think, in the balance of things, there might be some powerful threats and some powerful things that help me on my quest. And it becomes a bit more real and a bit more balanced to think, well, there are some access to powerful things. And what might tip the balance is helping people to reframe it a little bit and think, well, there are some powerful things that might help me on my quest. And we're thinking with people about, there are also some powerful threats. How can I navigate? We navigate life through narratives, I think. So what kind of narratives and how can we enrich this narrative, maybe to give me some skills and some support, and maybe access to some strengths that help me overcome these powerful threats. And then I might end up, whatever the thing is I want to end up. And then even if it's a small thing, I build my confidence. I think, wow, I haven't been out of the flat for 2 years and I managed to get on the bus and go down, walk around the harbour, come back again. So what else can I do? We could do this, just repeat it all again. It's the same idea, isn't it? What would you like? What's in the way? What helps? And then I'm thinking, we could go on a different kind of quest. And we often have more than one quest going on as well. So thank you. Wendy.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And I'm sort of thinking about this in relation to developing an informed, trauma-informed approach to an organisation. So I think having these thoughts around sort of the power conversations and the quest and the journey that we're all going to need to take. Certainly has been very helpful for me in sort of just starting those foundation thoughts, really. So I know it's something that, you know, Nancy and I spoke about a few weeks ago, and it's something that we're sort of looking at how we can work together to achieve that. And I just think the language of it being every day, something that everybody, wherever we are in the organisation, can grab hold of. So thank you for that. And I love the idea of a quest and a journey and a roadmap and all of that stuff that is accessible. So no, I've really enjoyed this first hour. Looking forward to the second one. Thank you.
Lovely. Oh, I'm really pleased. So that is a good thing as we come to have a comfort break, because the key to success is long and frequent breaks, is it not? So we'll come to have a break in a second, but just to kind of respond to what Wendy said first, and then we'll go for a break, and then we'll have a really interesting raising the bar here, a really interesting after second half, you know, and finish too. And I'll kind of pick up on any questions people have or comments and tailor a bit that way. But yeah, I think that's really helpful to think that that kind of simple quest narrative can be about an organization or a group as well as an individual. And that might help us get a common vision about where we'd like to be in 12 months' time, or where we'd like to be on our trauma-informed journey. And there's lots of things. I could say a little bit, I won't jump into it now, but I might say briefly a few things that might help on a trauma-informed journey for an organization. But there's lots. You're well ahead of the game in Plymouth, like compared to nationally, where a lot of some places are doing well, but like you've got a lot of good resources and good people here, and you know, so you'll have people around that know quite a bit about that journey and can be helpful and resources. Where in some towns they won't be thinking about that, or cities they won't be thinking about that. So that's a good place to be if other people are going on that journey too, isn't it? If they and you can learn from other people that have been on the journey. So you could learn from other organizations that have been on a trauma-informed quest and think, what are the key learnings from them? And then you think, oh, people who've gone on this journey have found X, Y, and Z. This gets in the way, like staff burnout, feeling, oh no, is this another task? And they found this thing helps. And then by sharing that, and they say, what do you think? You're doing that, applying some of those principles of trauma-informed care, like being collaborative, building trust, involving and empowering the frontline staff in this case, and then the people that are using the service, obviously, and nothing would be trauma-informed if you didn't involve people with lived experience of trauma in the process of whatever kind, whether that's people using the service or there's lots of different ways to do that. But then you're creating a collaborative narrative about, we want to go on this quest, these things get in the way, but we don't need to start from ground zero. We want to find out where people are at and then go on that journey. But we can learn from other people who've gone on that journey and kind of learning. We don't all have to learn exactly every mistake really painfully, do we? We can think, oh, that service tried that a few years ago, and this is their learning. And in life, individual narrative quests we can do too. So Wendy, great. Well, not now, but would it be helpful if I said a couple of things about trauma-informed organizations quests after the break? I won't take too much time up, but I shall share a little bit of thoughts about that. See what other people think as well. People know things here that I don't know about it too. So what do you think? How about should we just have a comfort break? Should we have 5 minutes? 6 minutes and come back at quarter past and have a nice 45 minutes and finish things off. Is that okay? For the slow boiling kettle people. 6 minutes. See you in 6 minutes. Oh, Scott. No, sorry, not Scott, it's Wendy. Oh, sorry, thumbs up. It was, wasn't it? These thumbs flash around places. See you soon. I won't take your time. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. I was a bit mean, wasn't I? I feel a bit mean saying I was getting excited about a future conversation, and I said, "Let's have a 5-minute break." How mean is that? It's like, and also then I was just got a little bit. I was going to share something with you. Copy the link. Don't. I wouldn't dive into it now because I want you to kind of get the most out of this. But I found something about organizations the other day going on a journey, which I found helpful. So I was going to share it with you. So I'll pop it in the chat for later. Paste. And I do want to say a few more things. Let's paste this thing. Has anyone come across this lady, Lorraine Farrow? She's runs maternity services up in Scotland. I don't know, like the world's a big place, isn't it, on some levels, and you might not have done. And that's a 30-minute video, and like it's more about maybe statutory services if you're working for the council or for the NHS, and because she was talking about, but it's not. She did a multi-agency. I thought this was the best 30-minute talk about taking an organisation on a. Have you? I don't know. Have you come across Lorraine Farrow in this? Anyway, I found this video. Only 18 people have watched it, and I watched it 4 times. So probably 14 people have watched it, and 4 of those are me watching it. Now, she talks very fast, as I find some people in Scotland do talk fast, so they probably get through a lot of information. I don't know if I'm hopefully not speaking out of turn here, but depends where you're from, doesn't it? So she gets through about an hour's information. I mean, and so what it does is she talks about taking a maternity service on a trauma reform journey using there's a lot of good school. I mean, there's loads of stuff down here as well, but you know, the Scotland has gone on a bit of a journey, and kind of, so they've got things like this roadmap and stuff, and they're all good ideas, but sometimes they can get a little bit complicated, and you know, the QI type ideas, they're good, but they can be a bit jargony. But she kind of says, look, this is where we went. So I'm just kind of sharing that as a resource, because when you talk about going on a journey, sometimes you come across something, you can say, oh, I know someone who's been on that journey. So anyway, I'm just chipping that in. And there are some other things about personal narratives I do want to ensure that I share. And but what we've just done now in a kind of organic way or open dialogue way is we're chatting, and I thought we were going to be chatting about individual narratives, but then we started thinking about, actually, you could use this picture of a quest for an organization, and that could help to motivate us. And then you could think, who else has been on this journey? And then when Wendy said that, I thought, oh, Lorraine has been on this journey. And you know, some things will be more local to them about maternity services in Scotland, in that area of Scotland, but some of them will be kind of general, can't say the word, general. I just a few quick thoughts, but I won't go on about it, just because I want to make sure that we cover the other kind of ideas about narrative, and also I want to kind of talk a little bit about trauma reactions as well on that journey for individuals. But the Scottish stuff is really helpful. There's that videos from something called the Improvement Service that are working with Scotland for councils, and they've got videos. Some of them are completely not relevant because it's about how to get a bus pass in Scotland. So, but some of the videos, a handful of them, are about trauma-informed stuff, and some of them are really helpful. So I'd suggest that just scrolling down their videos and finding the ones about trauma-informed to find out other people who've been on that journey. And then there's lots of good stuff. They've got a trauma, I might be saying things you know anyway, trauma transformation program website, and there's some resources there. I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you pretend to be Scottish, what I found out, you can click on and it says, do you want to look at the training stuff? And if you say, oh, I'm Scottish, or, you know, if you click through and say, yeah, you could watch it. I don't think they'd mind, because you're only just watching their training stuff. Now, obviously, there's a limit to online training stuff, but there's some good stuff there. You know, it's free. It's Churas, I think it's called, but the link's there. I mean, but it's just good to share ideas, isn't it? And then there's lots of stuff. Not everything's in Scotland, is it? You know, like you've got loads of resources down here. But I'm just saying there's training and stuff there which you can access for free, and some videos and stuff. And there's, with anything like online, there'll be strengths and weaknesses. You know, like there's a lot of stuff you have to do live. You have to kind of engage with people. And on that journey, I suppose what I've thought about and learned about, because I have done quite a bit of thinking and learning, and I'm involved, you know, have been a bit involved in this in different ways. of trauma-informed training, actually. But what I'd say is they've got these 9 drivers that help organizations to go on that trauma-informed journey. Apologies if people are familiar with this. Some of which is about having feedback loops, some of which it's about involving people with lived experience, about having a budget, and they're worth thinking about all those things. But what I'd say is, if we're related to that picture that I've just shown about going on a quest, one of the main things that gets in the way when you look at the research about piloting this stuff is staff feeling burnt out. They've got compassion fatigue, they've got secondary trauma, they're thinking, oh no, this is another task to become trauma informed. We haven't got time for this. So that's the thing that's getting in the way. But the thing that's getting in the way can also be an opportunity for something to come in, because one of the drivers that help organizations to shift, because if you just concentrate on training, it doesn't really change much, because the staff are still going and being stressed out, and they're going back into places where they can't practice being trauma informed because they've not got the structures, reflective practice support, etc. So although that's a big barrier, one of the drivers is staff welfare, well-being. And so what you could do if you're going to take the staff on that journey is concentrate on staff well-being, because that's going to get buy-in, because they're going to say, yeah, we are struggling with our well-being. It's really difficult. Let's co-produce and collaborate and think what does work at the moment around staff well-being. You're doing a really difficult job. What could we add in? And you could use this approach of thinking, what are we doing well that we could do more of? What is not helping, we could stop. And what new things could we add in? And that's a nice little simple kind of collaborative engagement process. And you could concentrate on 1 or 2 of those levers as well. Like, obviously, what I'm really keen on is people with lived experience being involved in a meaningful way in the process. People who've got lived experience of trauma. Otherwise, it's not going to be a trauma-informed approach. But I wouldn't try and do all 9 levers at the same time, because it's going to be overwhelming for the staff and the managers. You know, I've managed services and managed managers. You just think, wow, that's too hard. But you can choose 1 or 2. Collectively, collaboratively, and go on that journey and think, if we can go a little bit on this journey, then maybe we could look at some of those other levers later, you know, and we could look at review our policies later, maybe, because that's probably going to be important, but might not be the priority. Or there might be a Keeney person. Wendy, is that helpful? I mean, I might be saying things people know already, but
no, it is really helpful, and I like sort of, you know, the breaking the journey down and taking people with us, because we're at the very beginning of that journey together, and there's a lot of work to do to get buy-in, first of all. And so, you know, I think, as I said before, this is kind of providing, for me certainly, that those sort of foundation stones to identify those next steps, and how where the conversations can be going with colleagues. So no, very much, Ray. Thank you.
Great. And again, you might have more relevant things here, because I know there's such good work being done in Plymouth, but they have a walkthrough tool where it can help a service ask some good, it's a list of good questions to walk people through in a trauma-informed lens to say, well, what's it like here? What's, you know, and that tool is free to just download off the Trauma Transformation Programme website, Scottish Trauma Transformation Programme. I can't remember these things. You can Google it and find these things. But, you know, there's free, but there might be more relevant things in Plymouth as well. You know, like I'm just kind of, it's just because I've been kind of browsing that and a bit familiar with that. Right, and they've just drawn on other things, haven't they? People draw on whatever's around, a bit like any ideas, don't they? That you want to pick up the good stuff, but you don't need to reinvent the wheel for everything. So we just stumbled across the journey there, didn't we? That an organization might want to go on. So what I want to do, I think, to make the most of this time, is I'm going to share a little bit more, a few more ideas relevant to trauma and how they might fit in. More I'm thinking about the individual person, if you're helping an individual rather than an organization. And then we'll have a little chat about it. And if anybody's got any comments or questions, I'll attempt to answer them. So let's go. Let's see if this works. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Here we go. Oh, it's working. So yeah, so I was going to think, right. So next I'm going to think about, I'll show you the image as well, is when we think about what gets in the way, lots of things might get in the way. A lot of those powerful things might get in the way that are outside of us, like government policy might change and that gets in the way. Or the policy might change and it helps us. It frees things up. Or the local council decides to put more money aside for trauma-informed journeys to help people because they value that. Or the nation might decide nationally, we want to go on a trauma-informed journey, and that helps. So Scotland's done that, and Wales has done that, you know, nationally, to say this is something we're going to back and put some money into it and say it's important. So, but on an individual level as well, the kind of reactions that people have. So in what the power threat meaning framework would say, a lot of it's based on trauma-informed research, but it takes it a little bit further by talking about power and social power. It would say that when powerful threats are there, as well as powerful things that help me, I as an individual might have a threat response. I might do something in order to survive. And so that's what I'm going to talk about next. And I've put some symbols on that postcard image about what gets in the way, because sometimes the areas in which I react on my journey might be the thing that gets in the way, and it might be worth thinking about that. And I'm just being clear that all the things that get in the way are not inside me. Some of what gets in the way might be my reaction. So I might react by using alcohol and drugs, for example, to excess. So I'm not minimizing that. That can be a real problem. I had a problem with that, to excess, in my teenage years and 20s. For a long time, and nearly killed me, so I'm not suggesting that's just something to kind of gloss over and ignore, but it was a threat reaction, wasn't it? A threat response. It wasn't that there was something wrong with me or that I was an alcoholic. What it was I was having an understandable reaction to lots of threats in my life, and I found that drinking to excess took the edge off that until I learned some other stuff, like how to problem solve, how to make friends, how to join things, how to, make some changes in my life. So it's a more compassionate approach to say, well, maybe there's good reasons you were drinking to excess and taking drugs, Ray. It wasn't just that you were a party animal. I wasn't really ever that. I was just very lonely, and had lots of trauma, and I didn't know how to heal from that trauma on my own. So here we go. Here's the image. So hopefully you can see this. Oh, no, that's about the power one. Let's get to the other one. So that's skills and support. Okay, what's in the way? Does it say what's in the way on your screen there? And you can see that. Give us a nod, Wendy. Thank you. So there are 5 symbols here. So this is the simple way I would remember. Have you noticed there's a theme with my bad memory of everything is like 5 or less things? Otherwise you can't remember them. So there might be some powerful threats in my life, on my journey in life. In fact, I can guarantee it. Even if you don't have any aces as an adult, you're going to face some powerful threats, aren't you? And then my threat response might be in one of these 5 areas, I'd suggest, is one way to think about this from the research. So the light bulb is thinking, my response might be in my thinking. That's all that means, my thinking. So I might think, well, it's understandable. I might think bad things are always going to happen in the future. So my thinking about the future might be affected. And that might be when there's lots of threats about, it might protect me from being disappointment. If there's lots of disappointment in my life, to think bad things are always going to happen. It might be for good reasons. I start to think bad things. If lots of bad things have happened, we take our experience and we turn it into future expectations, don't we, as human beings? We take our experiences and we turn them into future expectations. So it's understandable. I might think about the future negatively because negative things have happened to me, or I might protect myself from disappointment by not being too hopeful because I've tried a few times to try and overcome this problem, like maybe self-harming or getting a job or being unemployed or staying in my flat and not having friends or whatever the process is. But also my thinking might be affected in other ways, like my thinking about myself. My self-esteem might be affected as my threat response. I might start thinking there's something wrong with me because I've been unfairly abused or attacked, or and so I might form a negative there's something wrong with me, not there's something wrong with the person who's harming me. Or I might start thinking, it might affect my thinking about other people, thinking all people are bad and harmful and going to harm me. And I might have an exaggeration. I mean, that's good reasons to form that idea, isn't there? Because it might keep me safe. But then it means it's hard to form relationships and get on with my journeys of life because we're social beings and we need other people. We need to work out who to trust and who not to trust, and who to trust a bit, like that degrees of trust. Because trust is a kind of flexible thing, isn't it? We build up trust. Or we might lose trust. But if I don't trust anyone, then I can't really progress in a lot of things in life because I can't ask for help, etc. other ways thinking about so self-esteem, other esteem, how I estimate other people might be affected in my threat response, understandably. And what I think about the world, I think I might start to have some very kind of negative views about the world, which might be understandable. The other four areas, the smiley face, my threat response might be in my emotional life. I might get very resentful and angry, and then that might be difficult to deal with, or I might feel very anxious. But then I could go on a course about how to manage my anxiety better, and I might get better at that. But it's understandable. I might be quite fearful. I might feel guilt. I might feel shame about what's happened to me, not having a successful life, whatever the culture is saying. In a consumer capitalist society, might be saying, I should be earning lots of money, consuming lots of things, or whatever kind of images there are out there about the good life. I might feel, well, I'm not succeeding, and I might feel shame. So it might affect my emotions. The heart stands for the body. The kind of word for that is somatization. You don't need to use that word, but the body keeps the score is a famous book, isn't it? So my threat response might be that I get headaches and skin problems, and might get problems with heart palpitations and not sleeping, and my body might be the main place where the reaction to these threats. Everything has a response. That Mikhail Bakhtin would say, everything that's communicated to me eventually has a response, even if it's sometime later. So the response might be in my body, that I get very tense, that I have back problems, etc. Okay, so that's the first three things are my thinking, my emotions, my body. The hands just stands for behavior. So my response, the things I do in order to survive might be that I use alcohol and drugs, or I overeat and binge eat to try and kind of swallow those difficult feelings down, or I don't eat enough, or that I stay in my flat, or there's all sorts of things, or I might overwork. Like that's something I've done throughout my life, is when I feel unsettled is I work hard, overwork, and there's some value to that, but all of these things are unhelpful in the excess. Overworking so that it affects my relationships with my family is not very good. When I was raising children, they've grown up and had children of their own, so now I'm a granddad. And the final area is people. And so we can think helpfully, and this is supposed to be like a simple way to think about this, is the thing that might be getting in the way is that my response might be in my pattern of relating to other people. And what I mean by that, and I might stop sharing to talk about this, and then we'll have a little chat about it. I'm hoping this is useful kind of thing to think about. What I'm trying to do is say that on a simple image about a quest journey, we might enrich the areas. And one of the things we might take in is some of the ideas about trauma-informed ideas about how we might react to powerful threats in our life or traumatic incidences, those 5 areas. And the final thing I was thinking about there is, and this is important when we think about people's journey and them getting sidetracked or stuck, is we all have to negotiate, this is a bit of a jargon phrase, but interpersonal power relationships. So what do I mean by that? I mean, it's normal in life to have to negotiate relationships of power. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a human thing. So, for example, if you're going to get a paid job, you're going to have to fall into line with what the job description is. And if your line manager says turn up at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, if you don't do that, you'll get sacked. So what you're doing is you're to some degree reasonably doing what they're paying you to do, and you're giving your resources over, but then you get economic power as a result. You get paid at the end of the month. So it's an exchange. And so there's a process in life about power relationships. Power isn't evenly distributed, and sometimes appropriately there's power differences. And obviously human beings tend to misuse them and abuse those power differences. So why am I talking about this? Because going on along in life, it's normal then to have a pattern of relating to other people. And if I've grown up in a situation where there's lots of powerful threats, like domestic violence or threats to me or threats of sexual abuse or stuff like that, I might react by being very agreeable. My pattern might be to agree with people, be a people pleaser, to use the popular phrase, and I might be quite submissive, and that's great. That helps me survive, doesn't it, in a dangerous situation? The problem is when you become an adult and you get a job in health and social care, is that you end up taking on too much work because the organization keeps asking you to do stuff. And like I kept agreeing to do stuff. I used to think, oh, they like me. They've asked me to, run this other service while I'm running this service, which I'm really stressed about, and second me for 2 days to run this other service. So I should have said no, but I just said yes because I kind of want this validation, self-esteem. They seem to be asking me to do more work, and I'm a bit of a people pleaser. So at one end of the spectrum, people might react in their patterns of interpersonal relationship by being very agreeable. In the middle, you've got a whole healthy bunch of skills like negotiating skills, being assertive, saying yes, saying, well, I'll take that on, but what am I going to give up if I'm going to take that extra piece of work on? You know, having some boundaries and being able to negotiate interpersonal power relationships. At this end, you've got trying to be controlling of other people. And that might be to try to feel safe, micromanaging people. You know, if you're in that kind of management role or in life, in relationships. So you could be overly agreeable and people pleasing, or at one end of the spectrum you might be overly controlling of other people to try to feel safe, and both of those are problematic in life when you're trying to get on with your quests. And you can learn skills to get into the middle there, where you're able to negotiate, stick up for yourself, but not try to control everybody, and try to have it be assertive, go on your quest, but help other people on their quests appropriately, and rotate these roles where sometimes we're helping other people on their quests, and then we might do that as just a goodwill gesture, to be a friend, to be a family member. But we might do that in a paid role where we're getting paid and we're kind of helping you because I get paid to do this actually, and it's a privilege, but I'm also. So does that make sense in terms of 5 different areas? So one of the things we can think about then simply is, we wouldn't talk about them all, I don't think, but we might hold that in mind, and we might add 1 or 2 of those curious questions in about, I wonder if what's getting in the way is maybe this behavior, and I'm wondering whether this behavior maybe is an understandable reaction to some powerful threats in your life in the past, or maybe now, might be currently going on. Makes sense. But, and this is important to say, I think, and then I'll see what people think is, so what often happens, I think, and I only realize this, chatting to people and using this thing, is when the threats are about, what seems to help is maybe I thinking that everyone's out to get me, or becoming very agreeable to everything and a people pleaser does help. It helps me survive. But then later on in life, as time, the threat might have gone, might not be there anymore. But then it becomes problematic. So maybe drinking a bit when I was a teenager helped me to kind of not feel awful, guilt, shame about having been sexually abused, etc. It did help temporarily, but then when I got into my, late teens, it was getting in the way of my life. So some things can be helpful. And so it's more compassionate to say, well, it makes sense that given that you didn't really know how to name emotions and you felt really bad, maybe you did get into some of these habits of thinking or behaving or agreeing with people to survive. But now it's no longer helping you on your quests. It's actually getting in the way. And so it's just a kind of everyday language way to think about. It's validating, isn't it? It made sense that I kind of, so what you could, although they're in the way, some of these things I might be confused because I think, well, it used to help me this, but now it's getting in the way because I want to fulfill a family role. I want to be a good mum or dad, and now my drinking is getting in the way of what I value, which I want to be a good mum, or I want to be a good dad. So I wonder what would help me overcome this problem, because when I was younger, it was helping me. Nancy.
I also think that's really true of organisations as well. So having led an organisation through trauma-informed work, the things that worked at the beginning that were really helpful to us, people kind of clung on to them as sure, like they would always be relevant and they would always be the case. And there was a kind of loss and a pain when we grew up a little bit and realised that no, that's what worked then, but we're a different organisation now. And there was a little bit of grief around that because people had become very secure and confident in them. So it's a personal and a community thing, I think that.
What a lovely connection, Nancy, that you've made there between this. And I wasn't necessarily expecting our time together to go this way, but it has. And if we're relaxed about it, we can open up a dialogue and see where it goes, can't we? Which is more useful to everybody than thinking, we're definitely going to learn X, Y, and Z or whatever. Because actually, it's more like these are useful things to open up a conversation about and see, what do you think? What do I think? What does someone else think? And what we thought about there, Nancy, which is a great point, is this idea about an organizational quest and some things that are helpful early on then actually might be getting in the way. And then there's a bit of confusion amongst people, maybe. And I think there's an individual confusion on our quests when things that helped us in the short term become, and I think this is another way to think about it. I think maybe organizationally, quests and individually, is some things are short term helpful. They help for a little while. But if you hang on to them for too long, they don't really help us on our quest. They become problematic, but we're attached to them then, aren't we? We think, well, we'll keep repeating it. Like it seemed to work before. And so there's something about, I think, if you think about the principles of trauma-informed care, safety being one of them, it needs to be safe enough to open up a conversation to think, well, is this really helping? Like my threat response is to feel I always work more, and that's not that helpful often. And then sometimes it is helpful. So that's confusing, isn't it? Because you think, well, there's some benefits and some downsides. So you think, well, maybe it's not about giving this thing up. Maybe it's just about maybe adapting it or changing it, or sometimes it's about stopping this thing, or sometimes it's about adding something else in, or realizing that that's a bit short term. Maybe you want something that's sustainable. That's the goal with trauma-informed organizations, isn't it? You want to embed sustainable stuff, and that's why you have reflective practice about these ideas. And so maybe you need a bit of space to reflect and think, to what degree is this helpful now? Because also the world changes around an organization as well, doesn't it? So some of the threats you face you may not have faced before. So the organization faces powerful threats, and you can think about all those different kinds of power. There might be government change of policy, lack of funding, or you've got these messages from the government about things. And super interesting. Anyone got anybody would like to come in on Nancy's point about maybe some things that are helpful in an organizational's quests? Then they become past their sell-by date. I'm using a metaphor here, right? They may be helpful for a while, and then they're not helpful because the world's changed, the organization's grown. Maybe time to adapt some. Any other thoughts about any of this thing? Yeah, James.
I'm just reflecting on the organisation that I work for, which is childhood grief charity engines, and we went from being very much staffed along a psychology basis that had a psychology cost to it, and we changed the culture. We employed people from different backgrounds based on skills and experience working with children, young people, and families. And the culture is slowly changing. I guess I got feet in both camps, being from my professional background. So I do find myself often challenged because I have that throwback to the old culture. But I guess it certainly resonated what Nancy was saying about the need to change, because it's a charity. We're not static. We don't have that guaranteed funding, so we've got to be slightly different in how we position ourselves, how we present ourselves in these forums of different forums. It's about how we appear. But it's I think the point I'm jumping around is around individual respect in organizations and the hierarchy that exists. So I originally come from the nursing background, and so the hierarchy there is rife.
Yeah. I'm familiar with the hierarchy. Yeah.
But there we go. Some random reflections.
James,
but there we go.
That's really helpful as well, because it helps us think about the story organizations tell about themselves, and I think this is a normal process. And the thing, and I will actually say, just so that I'm trying to be useful to yourself here, so I'll have a couple of minutes to say a few extra things about narrative that are relevant. But when we tell a story or a narrative, we cannot say absolutely everything that's going on because there isn't enough time and it won't make sense. we're experience everything 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's a different thing than the story. We fit that experience into a story to try and make sense of it. And here today, we've seemed to have stumbled upon in a delightful way that organizations have narratives that we're in, as well as, and quests as well as individuals. And one of the quests might be a trauma-informed quest for the organization, which I would fully support and think that's a great idea to go on that quest. And then as the world changes, we might, James was, I'm thinking about what James was saying, and what Nancy said, we might change, the organization develops, the world might change, and then some things we might be we're very helpful and attached to. Other people might draw on some other ideas that might be newer or different, and it might be challenging. And then what we're trying to do is we're also telling a story to ourselves internally, and then we tell a story to the world out there. And some of that's a bit existential. We might want to get funding, we might want to survive, even on an individual basis. I want some training from people like I said, well, like we are else apply for a salary job again, and that's another way. There's different ways to survive out there. So individuals and organizations can adapt to the world, and then there is a tension where sometimes there's a temptation for a gap to open up between what we say we are. We want some integrity, don't we? And we want there not to be a gap between what we say we are. It's easy to say we're a trauma or informed organization, or we're anything really, or you can have a website that says these are our principles. Well, they might be, or they might not be. You might be a million miles away from those. You just stuck them on a website. What matters is what you do. So if you care for your staff, caring for your staff will make that something that you value, because we do what we value, don't we? And obviously there's challenges and stresses to that, but it makes me think about that we edit our narratives, and we focus on some things and we turn it into a narrative, a story, to tell the world about this organization is doing this, we've been on this journey. Or we might be able to tell a story about changing as an organization to become trauma informed. There were some things in the way, but we overcame that, and that's great, and that encourages us to go on that journey. But then there's other journeys we might go on, and then sometimes we might not succeed on that journey, we might fail. I think that's a story that's not talked about much. It's not celebrated as a failure, so we may not succeed. But that's another story, isn't it? But a good story about that might help me to make sense of it as well if we don't succeed. But we do make sense of things in terms of narratives. We navigate our way through narratives, I think. Someone popped their hand up. I'm sure someone popped their hand up. And then I did want to just say a couple of extra things which could be useful.
I did. I was just going to reflect on the fact that sometimes it's also really difficult to hold on to multiple stories and multiple truths, and that's what I found sort of coming out of COVID, when people were like, oh, remote working really works for people. Because it also saves us money, because we don't have to have so many offices and all these things. And actually during COVID that was really helpful, but actually we noticed a loss of relationships and teams breaking down. But also thinking about the people that we were working with, for some people it was really helpful to access us remotely. For other people seeking support, it really wasn't helpful remotely. So it was that ability to almost like, we need to hold multiple stories and multiple truths, rather than this idea that there's got to be one correct way, and that can feel really difficult.
What a great point, Cheryl. I've probably got a few useful things to pop into my head when you said that. So one is, there's a danger in a single story, and if anybody hasn't seen it, there's a great TED talk by Chimamanda Adichie. I'll send the links around. You've probably got these links anyway, but she talks about the danger of a single story. She's a Nigerian novelist, wrote Half of a Yellow Sun. I'm not very good at reading novels because I can't read very well, believe it or not. I'm a slow reader, and I can't remember people when I read. Well, I like movies. I like pictures. Moving pictures. I sound like someone from the 1908 now, don't I? Moving pictures, things. So the point I'm thinking about is, so what's helpful then to think is not that we have a singular narrative, but usually what people have is multiple narratives all the time. And what I believe, just a personal kind of belief that I've come to, is what's really important is, rather than thinking I believe this narrative or I don't, we have degrees of belief. So part of me might believe this narrative where I'm going to succeed and maybe get a job or maybe be financially stable, and then part of me, 10%, might think, well, I think this might not work out. And it's possible to hold both narratives at the same time. So actually, Mikhail Bakhtin has a great phrase for this. He would say it's possible to think in different ways about the same thing at the same time, which is quite a liberating thought. It's possible to think in different ways about the same thing at the same time. And there are simple examples of that. You know, if someone's self-harming, I might think, oh, is this a symptom of a mental disorder that I've got, you know, bipolar or something, or I've got personality disorder. And then someone might think, oh, I wonder if this is a normal reaction to some of the threats in my life, and self-harming is helping me to cope, or it did help me to cope, and now it's gone from that helping process to... So it's the same thing, isn't it? It's just you're looking at it in this narrative, a biomedical model, or the power threat meaning framework is a non-diagnostic model alternative. And so it's possible to think about the same thing in different ways at the same time. And the way we think about things is often in narratives. And so I'm thinking about Cheryl's point about multiple stories. So some stories work for some people some of the time, don't they? But not for everyone, and even for ourselves. And so this is probably a good point just to mention a couple of other things that might be useful. So with that A, B, C, D, E kind of useful things about narratives, way to remember things, we've thought about asking good questions is the A, isn't it? Those 6 questions. And then we could ask additional questions. That's the second bit of that A. And the B stands for bigger and smaller stories. So sometimes I might have a personal story where I'm learning about, say, the impact of trauma and becoming more trauma informed because I think that will improve my skills. And I learn about concepts like the window of tolerance. I learn about the impact of trauma. People, how common it is. I learn about the ACEs, and I learn about the other ACEs, the adverse community environments. That it's not just about individuals, but it's about poverty, and it's about racism, and it's about, there might be things that harm me that are not in those little individualistic list of things that the ACEs measure. Have you been, as important as they are, there are other things that might be traumatic. So, but that individual story might be connected to a bigger story, and that bigger story might be to do with, there's a movement to realize that trauma is a lot more common than people used to think it was, and that it's useful to find out the impact of trauma. And a lot of staff, whether they disclose it or not, have lived experience of trauma, and there's also these other things. So basically, although I might be going on a personal journey to learn more about this, there's a bigger story that the organization I'm part of might be going on this journey, or the nation might be going on it if I live in Scotland, or the local area of Plymouth might be going on it, if not England. So do you see how there might be a bigger and a smaller story? Or if I want to pass a qualification, that's an educational quest, isn't it? But there might be a bigger story that I want this kind of job that says you have to have this qualification to get this kind of job. So I want to become a nurse, so I'm going to go on an educational quest to get this qualification, or a chef. And then when I get that, I will get this job of being a chef. You see how? Or a driving job. I go on a quest to pass my driving license because I want to get a job that involves driving. I want to be a truck driver. So you see how there's bigger and smaller stories. And it's worth thinking about that sometimes with conversations, because the original quest to maybe get healthy later in life might be unconsciously linked to another story, which might be really important about my parents might have died when I was this age, when they're the age I'm getting to now. And that bigger story has motivated me unconsciously to kind of really want to get healthy, because I don't want the same thing to happen to me that happened to them. Do you see how there might not be, but there might be bigger and smaller stories? And that's important in terms of motivation. And then the C, ABC, the C stands for what Cheryl started to talk about there, is there might be complementary stories, like the educational quest is motivated by the idea that I might earn some more economic power. If I got this qualification, I could go for this job that I want, and I might earn some more money that might help me to raise my children, or, you know, provide for my loved ones, dependents, etc., and have a better life myself, etc. So there might be complementary stories, that's a C, but there might be conflicting narratives. That's worth thinking about. So within me, part of me, instead of thinking what's wrong with me, I kind of really confused. It's helpful to then think, well, maybe part of me believes this story, that maybe with a bit of help I could overcome these problems and I'll be okay. And part of me believes this other story, that, oh, like in our culture that, you know, like it might not go so well, and so that's possible. Part of me, 20% believes this story, and what we might do is try to help people realistically strengthen and co-create and co-edit those more optimistic narratives realistically, that help people to move on with their life and let go of. Because if I believe a really negative story about myself, like I did when I thought, oh, I've got personality disorder or whatever, later, I got 7 different diagnoses when I was going in and out of psychiatric hospital. As long as I believe that, I'm not going to progress very much. But when I thought, this is madness, I'm not going to believe this anymore, I'll believe something else. You need to believe something else, another story, another narrative. But as soon as you stop believing a story, it has no power over you. Individually, it loses its power. It only has power while we believe it. It may still have some power, though, because although I don't believe it, if other people believe it and they keep treating me that way, thinking, oh, that's Ray, you know, and they have a view of me, I may have to navigate past that because they may still have that old view of me. Does that make sense? But I'm liberated from the power that narrative has over me. And the way Bakhtin and this dialogical kind of way of thinking about things would say is, when I believe a story, it's inside me, and I need to push it out of me. But in order to push that story out of me and not believe it anymore, I need to take into me another narrative, a more hopeful narrative, because we navigate our life through narratives. We reorientate our subjectivity within these narratives. And so I need a more believable story with a go-ahead plot to move into, to pivot into, if I'm going to give up a negative story. So I might think, oh, you've got some difficulties, Ray, but you can overcome them. And we need other people. We need a community of people who believe in those stories too, because it's very hard just to make up a positive story yourself and tell yourself that story and not tell anyone else and just carry on, because to go on that quest is difficult. There's ups and downs, there's challenges, there's times when you feel tired or not like you feel like giving up. So you need other people to hear that and validate and believe and think it's possible to go on that story, that quest, right? And other people, we could be that helpful person in other people's lives, helping to create a positive narrative. So I think that's helpful to think. It's not that there's something weird going on. It's that I may have, part of me believes one story and part of me believes this other. And I'm in this middle of this process of pushing out of me, with a bit of help, some negative stories that are not true, and taking into me some more optimistic, positive stories. And in that, I might need some help and skills, and I might need to overcome some of these threats, and I might need to learn some stuff, and I might need to make some changes. ABC. The D is the danger of a single story, Chimamanda. The E, just may as well get to the end of it and then see what we're going to have to draw things to a close. The E is that we edit. We can edit these stories all the time because we tap into our experience and we tell a story. We can't tell everything. So we kind of focus on some things. So sometimes what we helpfully do is help people focus on their strengths. We say, you know, one approach is this, are there any exceptions question from solution-focused approaches. You know, are there any times when this difficulty isn't around? Oh, tell me a bit more about that. And then you could build up a different story based on, oh, I don't feel anxious when I'm with my friend. And, oh, what's going on there? Oh, well, I trust her and she seems fair. Oh, so sometimes you feel anxious and sometimes you don't. That's different from I'm an anxious person, isn't it? So you start to explore a different sort of narrative to see yourself in. It might be a little bit different, but it's edited. So the E stands for editing. And the final thing, this is my super fast point, is, we also sometimes, the opposite happens. Although stories organize and shape our thoughts and our feelings and our behavior. If I'm on a quest to become a chef, I set the alarm and I go to chefing college, that sort of thing, and I have a fear of failing the chefing exam only because I'm on the quest. If I wasn't on the quest, I wouldn't have the fear of failing, would I? Because it's normal life. But also, sometimes I feel grumpy or stressed or I'm not sleeping and I'm not sure why. And we try to fit that experience into a narrative and I might think, oh, that's because I'm dehydrated. And that might work for a bit. But if I'm still feeling grumpy and stressed and not sleeping, it might not be that narrative I fitted it into. We might then try on a different narrative. Think, oh, am I feeling this because of some other narrative? And people are often, you know, like Job's comforters, people are often suggesting narratives to us to say, oh, the reason you're not saving money is because of this, or you know, like people might be giving us explanations. It's dehydration or it's this. And we have to decide then, oh, is that a helpful narrative to try it on? Is it helping me? Or does this experience fit into a different story? And that's worth thinking about. So I'm appreciating people are busy. I know I've kind of shared a few thoughts at the end there in a bit of a rapid fire, but I'm trying to be useful and I'm trying to say the ABC. So you see, most of the things are covered here. Any has this been helpful and useful? Any comments at the end? Would you take, if you held in mind what we thought about today, is anybody willing to share something you might take away from today? You might need to pop your hand up or just to come in. Anything you might take away? Wendy?
I really like your comment about editing. Oh, right. I do quite a bit of writing for work and also in my creative writing life. And I'm always editing, but I never think about editing my own personal story or my own personal work, professional story. And so that for me has just been,
lovely.
You know, so I just think that things can evolve and change, and there's a joy in that I think needs to be celebrated. And being a good editor from a writing point of view is a real skill, isn't it? That, you know, you've only got 500 words, you've got to do it. So I just think that's been really super, but all of it's been super helpful. But that, your last couple of sentences.
Lovely. Oh, I'm glad I sped up. I channeled a kind of Scottish thing there, sped up with my to try and get that bit of information in.
Thank you.
I have a friend who's from Glasgow, so you know I'm just kind of thinking about them. So I hope it's been helpful. I'm trying to keep to time as well. What do they say? Yeah, Shelley, has this been useful? And we're drawing things towards a close, really, and I hope people have found this helpful.
Thank you, Ray. It's a shame that we have to stop now. I mean, I've been on Ray's 5-day training, and so I've had the benefit of having time to think about this. So but it's been good to hear it said again, Ray, in a short space, and linking it. What I'm hearing, I think, for the second time is that our ability to hold that tension between those different narratives and letting go when we need to, and embracing that fluidity when what we want to do is hold on to certainty, and it's an emotion. It's emotional work in itself. I think
it is. Wow.
It's made me think again. I know the social prescribing team that I used to lead before I took on this role actually employed their own counsellor/supervisor to support that very, you know, the emotional work of what the staff are doing, working with people who are traumatized, but also in a traumatized system, and how just to give some space to do that maneuvering and that fluidity. And I think it kept everyone's head above water in a way that actually also looked after the whole. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think I know what I mean.
A lot of sense. Yeah, I do. I like a phrase about pressing the pause button. And sometimes in a safe relationship with people, we're pressing the pause button together, and we're kind of being able to reframe things, or at least explore and be curious about maybe this quest could change a little bit, or we could add something. We can co-create and co-edit this a bit. I'd love to stay longer, but I'm conscious of time for people. If anybody wants some training, drop me an email or whatever. But you've got lots of good things going on anyway in Plymouth.
Thank you. Ray, you said about link to your app. I could send that out to everyone and put it on our newsletter. So if you've got any of those links and you want to send them over to me, I could put them in our monthly newsletter at the end of this month, so that people